What's the current consensus, given that this flight was heading to London, heading to Gatwick, and we know that 53 British nationals were on board? What can you tell us about the current state on the ground in the UK?
11:30 in the morning here in England, and of course the news would have been received with immense shock and distress by those next of kin who were presumably waiting for what would be a customarily routine flight. Air India flies 6 times a day between India and the United Kingdom from its metropolises in Bombay, Delhi, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Amritsar. So this would have been just another routine flight, but of course it has not come to pass. And it must be recorded as the first crash since privatization took place and Air India returned to the Tatas nearly after half a century. And of course, it would be fruitless to make idle speculative remarks. Suffice to note this, at least as a historian in me, that upon seeing the tragedy unfold on amateur video, which has been made available on social media portals, one couldn't help but notice with disquietude what happened on New Year's Day 1978 to Air India Flight 855, which today, like Air India 171, a few seconds after takeoff from Ahmedabad's runway 2305, plunged and could not necessarily lift. So there was some lift or drag issues that becomes quite apparent. But of course, I must insert again that one must wait for the expertise reports and investigations to come in. But that is apparent, at least, that the aircraft simply did not ascend after the point of rotation from lifting off what would have been a routine takeoff from Ahmedabad's runway 2305. And that reminds me of what took place in Bombay on New Year's Day 1978, when that Air India 747 then, a Dreamliner 787 today, lifted off from Bombay's runway 27 for Dubai, and 2 minutes after takeoff, plunged off the coastline of Bombay near the waters, Arabian Sea, shallow waters, and none survived then too. I'm afraid it will be likely that there will be no survivors today also due to the fuel payload factor. It was a fully fueled aircraft which had just become airborne. But even then, with AI 855, just as with AI 171 today, it's a question of lift. So it could possibly be attributable to some instrument malfunction or human error.
Yes, absolutely. Just to clarify, we haven't had confirmation yet
Exactly.
on any fatalities, and we will wait for confirmation. But of course, that point that Berzin makes shortly after liftoff, the amount of fuel on board will of course be higher. It hasn't burnt off, it hasn't yet been used, and given the time following takeoff before this crash, just moments, minutes, there is a further risk there. I just want to allude to a comment that we've had from the Union Home Minister Amit Shah, who was tweeted saying that pained beyond words by the tragic plane crash in Ahmedabad, the disaster response forces have been quickly rushed to the crash site. Spoken with Gujarat Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel, Home Minister Harsh Shagavi, and the Commissioner of Police Ahmedabad to assess the situation. Berzin, this is an evolving situation. We're showing visuals on a rescue effort that is ongoing and will continue to be ongoing for some time. Of course, the hope and the optimism over potential lives saved from the flights is one thing, but this is a civilian area. We've seen images and videos of damage to buildings. This situation is a rare one and could have catastrophic consequences. What's your thoughts on the potential civilian casualty that might be taking place?
Casualties cannot be discounted. It is another grim reality which must be factored in, regrettably, given the fact that Indian cities are densely populated, and in most cases, in urban built-up areas across India, not just Ahmedabad, but elsewhere too, we have human habitation right up to the runway walls in question. So that is always a looming factor of risk hazard that has been pointed out over the years by experts. that urban conurbation buildup is simply a factor with India. So Ahmedabad was no exception in this case, as a densely populated city. So that has to be also borne in mind that these things do take place mercifully rarely, but when they do, it is awful, and the tragedy really comes home in that it involves other uninvolved bystanders too. That is to say, people on ground, as in the case of this aircraft, which lifted off, as I said from Ahmedabad's runway 2305, and a few seconds after takeoff, plunged in what is a residential neighborhood, which goes by the name of Shahi Bagh area in the city of Ahmedabad.
Yes, the situation is a tragic one, and more updates are coming through. Just to bring you a statement that we've had in the last few moments from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He has said that the tragedy in Ahmedabad has stunned and saddened us. It is heartbreaking beyond words. In this sad hour, my thoughts are with everyone affected by it. He says he has been in touch with ministers and authorities who are working to assist those affected. I just want to allude to this visual, this disturbing visual that is on screen now, just giving you a representation of the level of catastrophe at play. The explosion, of course, this plane fueled heavily for a long flight from India to the United Kingdom, Ahmedabad to London, and an explosion afterwards. I want to bring you another update that we have had in. Indian Railways have confirmed that they're going to run a special train to evacuate passengers stranded in Gujarat. This because the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport has seen flights cancelled following this devastating tragedy. Confirmation that the railway's disaster management team have reached the spot and that AC train will run from Ahmedabad to Delhi at 11:30, and an AC train will run from Ahmedabad to Mumbai. The situation continuing to evolve. Reactions from world leaders also coming in as well. Berzina, I'm going to come back to you. This tragedy is still unfolding, and it's difficult to talk about the next steps while we know that the scenes on the ground are still so difficult and devastating. But there will be an investigation into this. There will be an investigation as to why this has occurred and why, if there are casualties, they happened. How will an investigation like this take place? What questions will be asked, and who will be asked those questions?
Well, obviously, Boeing will be sending a team out to India, needless to state. Not to mention, Air India will also swing into action. And then there's the question of the Director General of Civil Aviation, DGCA India, which also to whom the final report will be submitted as and when the query concludes, a person to finding what is known as the black box voice recorder. And it is hoped that that would occur as soon as possible. Of course, rescue services and will be at it as we speak, working their way through, obviously, what would be, I regret to say, charred remains of passengers and crew survivors, and also those on ground who have been affected and hit at the point of impact, and extricating through a mass of not just aircraft equipment, wiring, passengers, food carts and the like, and the cockpit to make their way to procure the voice recorder in question, because that would be the best way to allay any suspicion or tensions or any other speculation which could be idle, to realize eventually what were the final tragic moments of AI 171 as it lifted off from runway 2305 Ahmedabad this afternoon. It would give us an idea into virtual time as to what ensued or took place, if there was a distress call, or it could have been placed as a mayday call, if at all not, we don't know. And what were the final moments on board on the flight deck, which is why it is absolutely imperative that the rescue teams, which are obviously in action, are able to procure through the debris the cockpit voice recorder in question.
Yes, absolutely, Bazin. I just want to break away for a second as we bring some further international reaction. China's ambassador to India, Su Fei Hong, has said that he is deeply saddened by the tragic plane crash in Ahmedabad. Our hearts go out to the passengers and their families. We stand in solidarity with all of those affected in this difficult time. Also, on the official Iran in India X account, the Embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran in New Delhi say they express their deepest sorrow and heartfelt condolences over the tragic crash of passenger aircraft in Ahmedabad. We extend our sympathies to the government and people of India, especially to the bereaved families of the victims. Our thoughts and prayers are with them during this difficult time. We also wish a swift and full recovery to all those who have been injured in this heartbreaking incident. We stand with the people of India in this moment of sorrow. This is a moment of sorrow and a moment of tragedy. The visuals that we have been bringing you, the live visuals from the scene, also the videos from the moment that the crash took place, providing you a clear understanding of the extremity of this situation. If you are just joining us, 242 people on board, a civilian passenger flight, which has crashed shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Of those 242 people on board, 169 are Indian nationals, 53 British, 7 Portuguese, and 1 Canadian. This situation is extreme, not just because of the number of people on this plane, which has led to this explosion you can see right now, but also because it landed and crashed in a civilian area. We understand that it crashed on a hostel which was housing doctors. We've shown you live visuals of the rescue emergency efforts on the ground. Charred buildings can be seen with smoke rising from them. Debris spread across the ground with smoke and dust filling the air. To bring you another breaking update, Union Home Minister Amit Shah, Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu, Minister of State for Civil Aviation Muralidhar Mohol, and the DGCA have all left for Ahmedabad by special plane. This is an evolving situation. This flight took off from Ahmedabad at 1:39 p.m. Indian Standard Time, and a very short while later, just minutes later, crashed. The situation is still unfolding, and we will bring you in with all updates as we get them. And one of those now, Ahmedabad Police, the city police, have issued an emergency number. If you are in the area and you do need emergency support, that number is 0792 562 0359. The situation is dire. The plane, fueled for a long journey, 9 to 10 hour flight approximately, from India to the United Kingdom. The explosion that we've shown you, made worse by that fuel. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone, the loved ones of everyone who may have been affected by this. global reactions, of course, coming in. We've read out statements from many people, just to reiterate some of those. We'll start with Prime Minister Narendra Modi first. The tragedy in Ahmedabad has stunned and saddened us. It is heartbreaking beyond words. In this sad hour, my thoughts are with everyone affected by it. Thierry Matou, the French ambassador to India, says France is deeply saddened by reports of the plane crash in Ahmedabad. Our thoughts are with the victims and their loved ones. Russia's ambassador to India, Denis Alipov, heartbreaking news coming from Ahmedabad. My heartfelt sympathies to the families and near ones of the victims, and to all Indian people and the government of India over this tragic major catastrophe. Comments as well from British Prime Minister and British Foreign Secretary David Lammy, 53 of those on board British nationals. Berzin Wagmar, I will come back to you now. A tragedy on this scale, devastation to potentially hundreds of civilians, the families that will be affected and impacted, an investigation expected, is difficult. Berzin Wagmar, coming to you, with a potential loss of life of this scale, what do you think will be done, and what can be a reaction from this, not just from Air India but also from Boeing, whose plane has gone down? Of course, investigations will take place, but will there need to be some accountability for a tragedy of this scale?
There will be some question, needless to state, accountability from all stakeholders involved: Air India, Boeing, and the Director General of Civil Aviation. That is the federal agency in India which oversees all civil aviation operations, as well as Airports Authority of India, AAI, who runs Ahmedabad Airport, among other airports across India. That's the first point to mention. And of course, what would have been a routine flight, in fact, which, as you mentioned, just departed from Ahmedabad's runway 2305 at lunchtime, 20 to 2 this afternoon, Indian Standard Time, and was expected at London Gatwick at 6:25 this evening, would have been a routine flight. In fact, 2 hours into the flight as we speak, just now it would have been over Iranian airspace, northwest track bound for London Gatwick. And of course, that unfortunately has not come to pass. It's currently just coming up to 10 to noon in England here as I speak, so the aircraft would have been wheels down at 6:25, all being well. Obviously, what would have been a routine flight, but which has clearly not occurred. And also, one must bear in mind, as I've mentioned earlier, that in Air India's 80 plus years of operations since its inception in 1932, this is one of its most tragic events. Of course, 242 have perished today, as did 213 in a near similar Air India crash, which I might mention for your viewers who are just joining us now. That took place on New Year's Day 1978, when that Dubai-bound Air India 747 Jumbo departed Bombay, and a few seconds after takeoff plunged just off Bombay's coastline into the shallow waters of the Arabian Sea, and none survived then too. That was due to an instrument malfunction and a question of human error, as it was made out to be, but primarily instrument malfunction. So that is eerily reminiscent to one when you see amateur video footage which has been mounted on social media portals of today's crash of Air India 171, in that the aircraft simply did not lift as is expected upon point of rotation after clearing the runway, and it simply did not ascend and banked and made a low drag thrust and finally plunged to the ground into the residential area in question. That would seem evident from what we see of its final fatal, grim moments.
Yes, absolutely.